Almost universally, the ancient texts, the calendars, and the codices reference this time in our lives as being a unique time in human as well as Earth history. In recent times, our own researchers now have validated that these changes referenced in those ancient texts are in fact occurring within this lifetime. Recent decreases in magnetics, increases in base planetary frequency, all signal a change unprecedented in human or Earth history. The same texts that reference these changes in our world and in our lives also relate a promise, an ancient promise, that will allow us gracefully to transition this time of change through a code of conduct in the way that we express our lives in the presence of one another day in and day out. They so eloquently describe the relationship between the internal and the external technology that we embody in this world. From this perspective, external technology is all that we have built in our world, the machines and the devices that we have built outside of ourselves, is us remembering ourselves by mimicking the function of ourselves in our machines. We continue with this path of external technology until we reach the point where we remember. And then we embark upon the path of the inner technology where we become the function mimicked in the machines outside of our bodies. That is the beginning of the path of compassion. Earth is undergoing a process now apparently unprecedented in geologic history. We don't see this exact process, certainly unparalleled in human history. Almost universally, ancient traditions remind us. They have expected this. To me, this is so amazing because this is the continuity. We're living an experience that has been known and prophesied and predicted and expected for at least thousands of years. In the oral and written traditions, and even more recently, within the last 3,000 years, we're seeing the direct words. This is actually a fragment from one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Dead Sea Scroll of Enoch, the prophet. And Enoch was very clear about the kinds of changes that we would see in this time in history. That crops wouldn't grow in their season, that weather patterns would shift, solar patterns would shift, and that people would change very quickly. Well, again, almost universally, those traditions say that somehow, through some mystical process that really wasn't well understood thousands of years ago, our bodies would change. They say our bodies will change. And now we know, our own researchers have validated that what we've always believed was a fixed code of DNA is not fixed. We live a variable code of DNA. It's like we came into this world with very specific parameters preset at the factory, if you will, the factory options. And as we come to terms with what life offers to us, we have the opportunity to turn on new patterns, to turn on new codes. This is the mystery. This is the matrix of the human genetic code. It was discovered back in the 50s, early mid-50s, Drs. Watson and Crick. This code illustrates 64 possible combinations of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen that we have available to us as patterns of DNA in our bodies. And we believe this was a fixed code. And it has been relatively recently, because of potentially life-threatening diseases, that researchers have gone in and re-examined these. They said, why would we? It's fixed. Why would we spend any time re-examining these codes? The mystery has been, since its discovery, of these 64 possibilities, the mystery has been why humans appear to have only about 1/3 of these codes enabled, 1/3 turned on. Why do we have about 2/3 of these codes shut down? Have they always been that way? For example, I'll ask you a question. What is it that humans have in common with guinea pigs, some bats, and some forms of monkey? What do we have in common? Excuse me. We are the only mammals that cannot produce vitamin C within our bodies. Other mammals can. Has it always been that way? We have everything we need to do that. It simply is not turned on. Why? May we turn it on? Well, researchers now are finding that is precisely the case. As individuals documented through their response to life experience are redefining what this code looks like, producing tremendously enhanced immune systems, cellular regeneration, as they are able to do this, they're doing this in response to emotion. Now this is a wonderful illustration from Alex Gray, a visionary artist named Alex Gray. And I'm showing a couple in embrace here. This is romance that produces emotion. And clearly romance is not the only source of emotion. I'm going to be really clear about that. Romance is a source of powerful emotion. Any interpersonal human relationship is the opportunity to have emotion. So it can be a corporate relationship, a friendship, siblings, parents. My goal in offering this information the way it's being offered is to take this tremendous technology of compassion out of the realm of religion. I'd like to be able to talk about this man and what he offered beyond the context of religion. Religions were built around this, and clearly we're not addressing a religious process here. We're addressing a powerful internal technology. So I believe, once again, that what we're doing transcends religion and science and mysticism. A sudden gust of wind hit me at that instant and made my eyes burn. I stared toward the area in question. There was absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. I can't see a thing, I said. You just felt it, he replied. What, the wind? Not just the wind, he said. It may seem to be wind to you because wind is all you know. You think about that. What's happening here? This is from the Lessons of Don Juan, Carlos Castaneda. And it mirrors an ancient Essene belief that we have come to this world where there are forces at work. They call them the angels. If you don't like the word angel, you can say electromagnetic forces. And you're saying pretty much the same thing. They say the angels of the wind, and the angels of light, and the angels of water, and the angels of the earth itself greeted us as we came into this world. Again, you can say electromagnetic forces of light and wind and water and earth. They are living conscious beings. Think about what that means. Every time the wind, when you leave here for a break and you step outside and the wind passes through your hair, the wind caresses your face, from this perspective it's a living being that has just shared time with you. If you don't know that, you just call it the wind. How many times have we witnessed events unfolding in our world, and because all we knew was what we were conditioned to know, we missed the meaning of what we were shown? Is it happening now? Well, the ancients said that we will witness phenomenon unparalleled at any time in human or earth history at this time, and clearly our researchers, our science are seeing things we've never seen. The ancient Essenes remind us so eloquently of our relationship with this earth. From their perspective, our bodies are living entities unto themselves, composed through the union, the holy and sacred marriage of the elements of this earth with the spirit that has come to inhabit the body. In the ancient texts, in the Essene text, they reference these elements as angels, today what we would call electromagnetic forces. And they speak to us very clearly of the angels of the air that carry the breath of life into every cell in our bodies. The angels of the water that carries life, pulsing, coursing through the veins of our bodies. The angel of the sun that brings the codes of life into our bodies, and the angels of the earth. The angels of the earth, when you touch the mud, when you pick up a hand full of gravel, and young children feel so comfortable doing this, this is us. This is what we're made of. As we come to terms with our relationship with the earth and these elements, we fully embody the indigenous traditions and the ancient ideas of what it means to be compassion, laying the foundation for those relationships in our lives. Compassion as a quality of thought, feeling, and emotion. Well, there's an interesting passage that I found, and I share many of these things through the Essene traditions, and there are certainly other traditions that have been part of this. As I was going through some Egyptian texts attributed to the Egyptian master Thoth. Thoth was reported to be the oldest Egyptian master. He lived for thousands of years continuously, if we're to believe those texts, into a later lifetime where he became Hermes. It was one and the same, and he anchored the wisdom of sacred science and ancient technology. Well, I'll share with you from this text the word Thoth, and in these words I believe you'll see an ancient reference to a technology, and that's the technology we're beginning today. Look what Thoth has to say. He says, "When into thee there comes a feeling that draws thee nearer to the dark gate, examine thine heart to know if the feeling thou hast has come from within." Now listen to this. "Send through the body a wave of vibration, irregular at first, regular at second, repeating time after time until free. Start the wave force in thy brain center, direct in waves from thine head to thy foot." I believe that wave force is the same wave force that was referenced later through the technology of the Essene traditions that we call compassion. So now we can look at it from a different perspective. Now compassion as thought, feeling, and emotion, the union of the thought and the emotion creates the feeling. That's the wave force that we send through our bodies that allow us to respond to life in a new, life-affirming, powerful, healthy way. And they didn't stop there. They went on and illustrated for us how to do this. What I've done is I've gone through many texts, primarily Aramaic in nature, from the Essenes, through many translations. Some were Tibetan, some were Ethiopian, some were Egyptian from the Coptics, some were Greek, and some are just now being translated from the Aramaic into English. What I'm going to share with you, I've never seen compiled nicely and neatly in one place, although it would be nice. And I see it referenced, it's scattered throughout text. So I've pulled them together for you in the 20th century idiom so that we may access this quickly and apply it in our lives. Using our thoughts from our left and right brain, driven through our emotions, our ability to resolve our feeling world. When you shift thought, feeling, and emotion, you're shifting your belief systems. Your ability to do that, that's you repatterning the codes in your body that determine how you see your world. Well, the Essenes said, here's how you do it. We will leave you the equations. Rather than number and variable, they're logic and emotion. We'll leave you the equations. As you resolve your feeling world about these equations, that's you repatterning the code. Or another way to say this is that through your directional system of your thoughts and the power system of your emotions, that union is you repatterning your code. So they left us this equation, and it goes like this. If these things happen, then you become compassion. If you acknowledge, trust, and believe in specific tenets that they offer. If we do not acknowledge, trust, and believe, then we've just defined our own path of exploration. This is the beauty of the Essene texts. They empower us to find our own way as we walk between the worlds of heaven and earth. So many times we finish a workshop and people say, now that was really a great workshop. What do you recommend that I do next? Whose workshop should I take next? Or what book should I read? And while those are all valid paths, the beauty of the Essene path is that where you have problems with what they offered, that is your path to reconcile that. You've defined your own path. Our life is the meditation. Life is the prayer. Life is our offering. And this is how we're asked to accommodate life as it's shown to us. Okay, so these are the tenets. I'll begin with the first one. If you acknowledge that there's a single source of all that is or may ever be, and that every life event, without exception, is part of that source. And we spoke of this a little bit earlier. Do you believe that there is a single source of all that you will ever witness in your world as your life? Or do you believe that there is a source of some things, and there is another source for other things, and another source for other things? Your life will mirror that belief. Your life and your relationships will mirror how you feel about this belief. Now, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I believe there's a single source of all that is. I believe that. And then when something happens that challenges your belief systems, I've seen this happen with individuals, they say, well, that's not part of the source. That's not part of the same source. That's something different. That's an exception. If this holds true, if there is a single source, then it is just that. It's the source of all that we may know. If you trust in the process of life as it's shown to you, in divine timing with no accidents, do you trust in the process of life? You must come to terms with this. In the process of life, does life feel safe to you? If you believe that each and every experience drawn to you without exception, there can be no exceptions, is your opportunity to demonstrate your mastery of life. What if we view life as opportunities to demonstrate mastery rather than tests that may be failed or passed? Big difference. Your body responds to that feeling. It feels very, very different to know that when life offers you a task or a challenge, and you know that you have done the best that you are capable of doing in that moment, and that's all there is. You didn't succeed, you didn't fail. You simply had that experience, and that was your opportunity to demonstrate mastery. I'll invite you to allow for that possibility. Life becomes much easier if you allow for the possibility that you are not being tested in each opportunity. If you believe that your life mirrors your quest to know yourself in all ways, that by knowing your extremes you find your balance. How could you ever find your balance in life until you know what the boundaries of that balance are all about? How can we know our balance until we find our extremes? This is not an invitation to go out and live life to the extreme, unless that's your choice. The beauty of the hologram, and this is why we did this earlier, is that we each may experience different extremes and we all benefit, so we don't all have to have the same experiences. Some of us have been to the depths of sorrow and pain through personal tragedy, and others have not. And we all may benefit from that. Those that have chosen to carry themselves into that experience, to know themselves in that way, it's in the grids. So we've all got it now. Not all of us have to live the same extremes, day in and day out. If you truly believe that your life essence is eternal, then do you believe that your body may enjoy the same experience? Do you honestly believe that your body may transcend death? Do you believe that life essence is eternal and that your body may also be eternal? If you believe that, then life looks very different to you. You know that you are not susceptible to the things that take life from you. And in that knowing, you may allow for the possibilities of their existence without their experience. If you feel that your life is finite in nature, that's an expectation. These are the 5 tenets. If you believe and trust and acknowledge in these things, then how can you at the same time judge? Doesn't work. It is illogical. If you acknowledge, trust, and believe in those tenets, you cannot judge an event, choice, or action from yourself or another. You will never see anything as other than an expression of the one. And when you find yourself in anger, or you find yourself judging, or you find yourself witnessing something as right, wrong, good, bad, light, dark, or something outside of the one, then you have just identified to yourself one or some combination of those tenets that is seeking a greater healing. It's not right, wrong, good, or bad. It simply is asking you to embrace a greater possibility. It's the only way that that can happen. If you believe your life is eternal, believe that life mirrors your quest to know yourself in all ways, in divine order and divine timing, and that every experience masterfully drawn to you is an opportunity rather than a test, an opportunity to demonstrate mastery. You trust in the process of life, and you acknowledge there's a single source of all that is, then how can you judge or see anything as other than the one? These are codes, and as you embrace these codes, they change the body chemistry, your body chemistry, allowing you the molecular expression of what this offers. As you embrace all of these in their totality, you have become compassion. There's no other way. You have become compassion. If you question or do not believe in the essence of even one of these statements, then here's the logic. If this, then that. Then you just define your own step, your next step in your path toward balance and mastery. If you're seeking that level of mastery, now you have those steps to do that. So you say to yourself, what happens if I have already embraced all of these things and I've done all these relationships and I've witnessed myself in the presence of all these masters, and still, every once in a while, I'll witness on the 6 o'clock news or pick up the newspaper, or I'll see in those that I love and hold most dear something that hurts, something that I feel that charge right here inside my body. How do I move that charge? How do I move that charge? What I'm going to share with you is so simple, and it's so eloquent. It's been in our presence and perhaps not well understood for a long, long time. Because we're given a gift. We're given a gift to apply to the things that have hurt us the greatest in life. And in that gift, we free ourselves to move forward in life. If compassion is our program of reconciling life in our world, blessing is our code of opportunity that makes the reconciliation possible. The ancient gift of blessing. Let's look at blessing and see what it really is. Your gift of blessing is a modern expression of a promise, and the texts speak over and over again of a promise that was given to us a long time ago. The ancient promise by those who have come before us reminds us that each soul survives everything, even the darkest moments of life, to return home once again intact and with grace through every experience. That's the promise that we trusted when we came here on an unspoken level. The gift of the blessing is what it is that fulfills this promise. What is blessing? Blessing is perhaps one of the single most powerful vibratory codes that was left to us, and seldom have we been shown how to apply this code. The gift of the blessing is our opportunity to free the charge within our bodies and move forward with life's offering. Blessing may be defined as a quality of thought, feeling, and emotion. It allows you to acknowledge the holy, sacred, and divine nature of whatever has occurred. It does not signal agreement, consent, or condone any action. It simply acknowledges that the event is divine in nature and allows you to move forward with life. If there's a single source of all that is, then everything, without exception, that we'll ever witness must be of that source. It must be sacred. It must be divine in its nature. When we bless that which has hurt us the greatest, what we're saying is we're acknowledging its holy and sacred nature. And that's all we're saying. And there's something magical that happens when we do that. And this may be one of the places where words may fail, and it's an experience that we must have to really demonstrate the role that this blessing plays in our lives. People ask me, as we're going through this part of the workshop, they'll say, well, you mean you want us to bless something? Who are we to bless? I thought only holy people can bless. And what I say to people who ask me that question is, If not you, then who else? Who could be more holy than you? And who could be more sacred than you? You who have journeyed so far through the experience of creation, in the presence of one another, and have come to this world to witness one another and to witness yourselves, what could be more holy of an act than that? If you are not the person to bless an event, then who? So what is this blessing? When we bless something, what are we saying? We have the opportunity, when we witness something that has hurt us in life, and I'll use some examples we've already gone through, and maybe some others that we haven't gone through yet. What happens if you bless that which has hurt you greatly? Do you know what a powerful being it takes to do that? To look directly into the face of the things that have caused you the greatest pain and brought you the depths of darkness in your life and say, I bless this thing. And in that blessing, all you're saying is that what has happened is sacred, divine, and holy. It's but of the one. You may not understand where it fits or how it fits. And in that, there is a release that happens in that. That may not happen the first time. Typically, when something hurts us in life, there will be 2 or 3 aspects involved. There is usually the origin of where the hurt comes from. There's the object of the hurt. And sometimes there's a witness to the hurt. A few years ago, there was a movie that came out entitled Dances with Wolves. Who has not seen Dances with Wolves? What a great group. Well, since you've all seen it, we don't have to see it again now. The first time I saw Dances with Wolves, I thought I was the last one on the planet that had not seen it. So in the privacy of my own home, I rented the video to watch it. And I was moved tremendously by a very particular scene in there where Kevin Costner, the soldier, had developed an intimate friendship with the wolf named Two Socks. Man and animal together. Beautiful friendship. And they did a wonderful job filming and putting this together. And the context of the movie was done so beautifully. It was just a masterful production. Not too far into the movie, through a series of events, the life of that wolf is taken. And I was surprised when I saw that. And I was surprised at my response. Because I cried and cried and cried. And what I realize is when we see movies like that and we're touched that deeply, we're touched by what happens on the screen, and it goes beyond that, because that movie, as people witness that movie, it touches for them that place of every time that they've ever lost something that they hold dear. And it's all personified in that one event, and that's why it feels the way it feels. Well, the second time I saw it, I went to a theater because I was interested in seeing how other people would respond. And when this point in the movie came around, I was sitting in a vantage point and I could watch other people. And I had the opportunity to see how they responded, and it was amazing. There were some that couldn't watch when the wolf was being shot. And they turned away or they got up and left and never came back. So they never had resolution to that. They were left with that lingering emotion. There were some that were angry. They were outraged. They were yelling at the soldiers who were taking the life. And there were some who sat motionless, absolutely motionless, and just watched. The gift of the blessing. What happens if we bless the soldiers that took the life of that wolf? You've all seen the movie. In your mind, say it. Bless those soldiers. Bless the soldiers who took that life, so that they may know themselves in the taking of that life. Bless the wolf who gave his life, who loved enough to give his life. Bless us in witnessing. Bless us in watching. How does it feel as you say those words? Does it feel awkward to you to say, to bless something? Does it feel awkward to bless something that's hurt? We went through an experience similar to this in a workshop recently, and something interesting happened in this workshop. There was a gentleman that was there who had never done a workshop like this before and came because his wife said he had to. And then she canceled. And he came alone. And I didn't speak to the gentleman for the first 2 days of the workshop. The second day we went through this process and we spoke about dances with wolves and the taking of the life of that wolf. He went home that night and he and his wife talked about this experience. Well, they had never had any children, and they had a dog. They'd been with him about 13 years, a German Shepherd, who had become very ill. She'd become cancerous, I believe, and could walk only by crawling on her front paws. And the vet was saying to them, I don't understand why this dog's still alive. What's keeping this dog alive? He shared this story with his wife of Dances with Wolves and gift of the blessing in the release of what that's all about. And they stayed up late that night and talked about it. And the next morning he came in. As we're beginning the workshop, he said, I'd like to stand up and share a story. And I was amazed. I had no idea what he was going to say, and I said, sure. And he shared this story with us. And he said, I went home and talked to my wife last night about what I'd seen here. We applied it in our lives and what's happening with our pet. We woke up this morning and she had died during the night. And he said, I can't prove this, but I believe what happened was that she was here because we weren't ready to let her go. And as we worked through this together, through the gift of the blessing, there was a freedom that we felt within ourselves. There was a release, and on some level she must have sensed that. And she knew that it was okay. And she left us last night. So you never know how the effect of the blessing will manifest in our lives. And I know that it's powerful and that it's freeing. Our greatest levels of mastery will be found in witnessing what life has offered to us and redefining what those events mean. And the ancients left us the context for that. As we redefine what they mean and we're able to free ourselves, then we move forward with life. This is not about complacency. This is about action from a place of empowered emotion, rather than action from anger or revenge. People have asked me before, they said, well, what if we just don't see any application for this at all, or we just don't see this in our lives at all? And what I say to those people is, what choice do you really have? You will either go through life and find a way to reconcile what life offers you, or you'll go through life seeing life as challenges and tests and dealing with the consequences of that. Those are your choices, essentially. This is our opportunity to reconcile. So in the blessing, what we do is we acknowledge any thoughts, feelings, or emotions to be present. You're incapable of an inappropriate or incorrect thought, feeling, or emotion. What you're feeling is there. If you witness something and you're outraged, then you're outraged. Honor that. Allow that. Say, yes, I'm outraged now. What do I do with it? Our conditioning is to say, oh, I shouldn't be outraged, so I better do something else. Well, it's not really outrage. It's more like and then you'll find other words to rationalize. It's a mental process. Allow whatever it is you're feeling. Go through those 5 equations and find out which one or which combinations of them, and you'll know them when you read them. If you've just witnessed an event in your life, and you're feeling that charge, and you read through those 5, and you get to the one that says, oh, no way. That's the one for you. That's the one. And then I'll invite you to invite that greater healing into your life. And as you come to terms with what this may mean to you, invite the gift of blessing into your life. And have a box of Kleenex ready. The tears are not necessarily sadness. Tears are the way that our bodies respond to moving charge. It's a balance. It's a new balance that we found in our lives. And it happens at times when you least expect it. What I'll invite you to do is to take these gifts, and that's precisely what they are, file them away. Should you find a time when your belief systems do not serve you, then you have the opportunity to invite a new belief system into your life. And I bless you on that day, because it will be a powerful, powerful day, should that come in this lifetime. Compassion is not about complacency. We're not saying go around, bless everything, and then walk away. As you are looking at events that have already transpired, and you're left with the memory, how do you get through the memory? The blessing is the release in the memory. As you're witnessing the events in real time, standing there blessing that event is meaningless. And as you take action, what have you become in that action? That's the key. This is what is offered to us in these texts. Now, they offer this as a way of life. It's not something that you do upon occasion. This is an awareness that you become. You become that neutrality, and I say that very cautiously because clearly we're not asking people to move away from feeling. Just the opposite. We're asking people, providing the opportunity for people to feel in a way possibly they've never felt before, with the clarity of the feeling rather than the distortion of all the things surrounding it. As you become this, we've outgrown the doing. We're asked to become. As you resolve those 5 equations of emotion and logic, if you've truly come to terms with each of those, then something has changed in your body, and you walk that result. I believe, I asked earlier, I said, we're the angels in this world. And I believe you're the angels. We are the angels. We're all in this together. We're the angels that have come to this world. And from that perspective, what I know is that anyone that crosses my path is an angel. If we're all angels, then we're all angels. Not just angels sometimes. And what I know is that angels cross our paths at times we would least suspect it. 3 weeks ago, I had the opportunity, and Melissa had the opportunity to witness, probably the worst, okay, I'm judging it, the greatest degree of anger and rage as an adult that I've had in years and years and years. And it happened quite innocently, quite unexpectedly. As we were driving to Houston, driving to Albuquerque to fly to Houston for a workshop, I stopped by a design company who's working on a book for me for what I believed was to sign off on something that had already been done. The publisher happened to be on the phone. He happened to have a friend in town who had never witnessed this book before, had no idea what we were doing, happened to drop by and happened to critique the entire book, and had faxed it back with tremendous amounts of changes that made no sense whatsoever in American standards. Some of the changes were valid, some were good, and many of them were not. And when I began talking to this person on the phone, I felt this tremendous anger and rage welling up inside of me as I sensed I was being attacked on this text. And it was interesting because we had about a 3.5 hour drive to the Albuquerque airport, and I probably didn't say much for the first 30 minutes down the Taos Canyon, and Melissa knew that I was quiet. And as I went over this in my mind, what I had to say this, because if it's true, it's true. Every person in this world is an angel. An angel had just crossed my path and had just shown me something about myself that had surprised me. And I began from that tenet forward. And I went through this process, the processes that I've shared with you. And what I found was that as I was able to take the recommendations and reconcile my emotion over the sense of being attacked, the outcome was going to be ultimately, I mean, most people would never know this happened. What they're going to have is a better book. And I went at it from that perspective. I think angels drop in on us. Melissa and I were driving down the freeway, and on the exit ramp, I saw a pregnant woman, hitchhiker, homeless, with a box and a can. And we were in a hurry on our way to the airport, and I drove by. And as soon as I drove by, I knew that I shouldn't have. And there are no shoulds and shouldn'ts. I felt that I had chosen to stop and that I had kept driving. The other part of me had kept driving. So got off the next exit, went through a couple of traffic lights, came back up the other side, came back down again. She was there and I missed the exit. She was still there. Went back down to the exit, went through a couple of traffic lights. I went back up. I found the right exit to offer her some money, and she was gone. And I knew in that moment, it was less important whether or not she ever got that money, if she was ever really even there. What had happened was she was there, we had witnessed her, and in that witnessing, we had made a choice, and something changed within us. And I believe we work that way with one another. I believe things like that happen all the time. All the time. Sometimes they don't even know they're angels. If you don't like the word angels, you can substitute your own words in there. I know you're all not from around here. Nobody's from around here. So if wherever you think you're from, or whatever that means to you, you can put your own language in there. Can you see how this may apply in your life, if you allow for its possibility, and how it may serve you? This is all about serving you. I would never choose to convince, persuade, or redefine any existing belief system that you have, because it's served you so well, it brought you to this room. And it may continue to serve you. And should you find a time that does not, you have this. You have this. This is a particularly powerful image for me. It was painted by Cheryl Rose in Mount Shasta. This is Christ as an initiate remembering, rather than as a fully evolved, all-knowing being appearing. As we're shown in the Essene text, he went through a process, very accelerated, and he had a lot of help in his life, where he remembered from those around him these truths. And what he said in the text, and what the other Essenes have said, is that these truths within us we'll never find in our external studies, ultimately. We'll never find them in our external sciences. Look at the temple walls in Egypt. Over and over again, you'll see references to these beings holding tuned, resonant rods, vibratory rods, and bowls and bells. And in the indigenous traditions, all the sounds that allow people to move into a space, the value of those outside traditions, and all those texts, and all the science, and all of these tools, is that they are references. They're reference points that bring us back to the place where we know ourselves in wholeness. And what we're asked to do is to remember what that feels like, and then to become that feeling. And you no longer need the external texts, or the outside temples, or the machines that make you feel better, because you have become that. They've served their purpose. This is the difference between the Western and the Eastern and ancient traditions. In the Western traditions, we find things that we like. We say we need them again and again and again because we rely on them. In the Eastern and the ancient traditions, we find them, we embody them, and we say we've learned, we've remembered from them, they've served us well. Now we no longer need them because we've become the offering. Over and over again, you'll see this in the Egyptian traditions. People say, well, even the Egyptians used tools. And I say, yes, they used tools as a reference of emotion. We're asked to look to nature to know of the true laws that govern our existence in this world. And in the presence of one another, is where we live the initiation. We don't have to leave our homes, our jobs, our families. We don't have to give up everything we've ever held dear. If we do, that's a choice. You don't have to lead what people consider to be a spiritual lifestyle. Your opportunity is to take whatever this information means to you and to anchor it and live it in your world that you've created for yourself. To live it in your workplace and to live it in your communities and in your families. And you never have to say a word. You simply become the change that results from whatever this information has meant to you. This is where I believe we see our true teachers. You look into the eyes of these children. You seen any new children around lately? Something changed. Something changed. They look different than they used to. There are some amazing, powerful, masterful beings appearing in our world right now in little tiny bodies. And they always have. They always have. I believe that there are more and more that are occurring now. The science of compassion is the vibratory technology that you may choose to become in your life. And it is in the becoming that you find your greatest joy, your highest levels of mastery. It is in the becoming whole within yourself that you may offer to those that you love and hold most dear your greatest gifts. How may you ever give to another if you've lost so much of yourself in the survival of life? What's left to give? There's a wonderful story in the Essene texts. A woman was carrying a jar full of meal. This is how they shared their wisdom. She was carrying a jar full of meal, and the bottom of the jar broke while she was some distance from her home, and she didn't know it. And she continued her journey home, and when she got home and set that jar down, it was empty. And when she went to feed her family, there was nothing there. You are that vessel. Your love, your compassion is the grain. And as you walk between the worlds, as you journey through the waking dream that we call life, and you compromise portions of yourself, you give that grain away little by little to survive life, to remember. Every once in a while you'll find a point in your life where you really, really are choosing to give and share of yourself, maybe in a way you've never done before, and you reach into the vessel and you say there's not much there. And that's when you know you found the right person that will love and support you and allow you to find those pieces of yourself again, pull them back together so that they may receive that which you're choosing to give in life. We work this way. Compassion is an opportunity. It's a science, it's a technology, it's our truest nature. We can call it all of those words. It's something that we become. And I believe that was the greatest message that was left by this reference being and others, as an opportunity for us to know ourselves in the fullest potential of what it means to be human, and nothing more and nothing less. And for this man's life and for that opportunity, I give thanks. You have asked, and our discussions now have led us to a point where I knew we would arrive sometime this afternoon. Because you're saying to me, and thank you for trusting enough to say to me in this room, you, everyone, how do we do this? How do you do these things? You said I live in the dream, and maybe I do. This is the waking dream that we call life. And in my dream, I believe in compassion, and I believe in the possibilities of human and what it means to be human in this world. And we're asking the same questions now that were asked 2,500 years ago. In closing, I'll share with you the way that the initiates then were answered, and I'll invite you to put your books down, place your feet flat on the floor, sit up in your chairs, take a couple of deep breaths, deep yogic breaths. Close your eyes. Listen to these words. As we ask of ourselves the same questions that were asked by those who have come before us, how do we do this in our lives? How is it that we bring peace to those that we love and hold most dear? The questions are the same, and I believe the answer is just as relevant now as it was 2,000 years ago. I'll invite you to listen to the words, feel them in your body, feel what these words feel like as you hear them from my mouth to your body. To lift your eyes to heaven when the eyes of others are on the ground is not always easy. And to worship at the feet of angels when others worship fame and riches is not always easy. And perhaps the most difficult of all is to think the thoughts of angels and to do as angels do. The sons and daughters inherit the lands of their father. So we have inherited a land from our Father. And this land is not a field to be plowed. Rather, it is a place that lives within us. where we may build our holy temple. And even as a temple must be raised, stone by stone, so you will be given those stones for the building of your holy temple, that which you have inherited from your Father. And your holy temple can be built only with the ancient communions, those which are spoken, those which are thought, those which are lived. For if they are only spoken with the mouth, they are as dead. Your communions are a bridge between you and the angels, and like a bridge can be built only with patience. Just as the roots of the tree sink into the earth and are nourished, and the branches of the tree raise their arms to heaven, so you are like the trunk of the tree, with your roots deep in the breast of your earthly mother, and your soul ascending to the brightest stars of the Heavenly Father. And as the roots of the tree are the angels of the earthly mother, and the branches of the tree are the angels of the Heavenly Father, this is the sacred tree of life. And it is this tree which stands in the sea of eternity. To lift your eyes to heaven when the eyes of others are on the ground is not always easy. And to worship at the feet of angels when others worship fame and riches is not always easy, and perhaps the most difficult of all is to think the thoughts of angels and to do as angels do. And take one more deep breath. And exhale. Pull your tummy muscles in when you exhale. Anchor this moment. Whatever those words mean to you, if they serve you in this moment, anchor them into your awareness. As you feel complete with that, open your eyes. Those words sound familiar at all? Powerful words. Perhaps the most difficult of all. To think the thoughts and do as angels do. Well, you are the angels. And you have the tools. And this is the time, and there's only one of us here. And from our many and varied perspectives, I believe that we are like the geese, carrying one another in our flock to that point of convergence. The ancients called the shift of the ages, because we love and care about one another that much. And I believe that we each do it in the way that we know how, to the best of our ability in that moment. And it is this kind of change in our thinking that brings about the kind of world that I choose to live in, for our children to live in. And I believe it is accessible. It's within reach. It can happen in a heartbeat if we believe that that is possible. And we must believe that first, and the belief transcends the mental, logical process. We must feel that that is possible. So as you witness the challenges of life, and you find yourself responding the way that we respond to the challenges of life, I'll invite you to go back to the 5 tenets of compassion. left by the Essenes, and as your relationships show you yourselves in many, many ways, and you find yourself asking, what is it this relationship is showing me? Go back to those mysteries, the mirrors of relationship. And it won't take long before you find that you no longer need to go to those things because you've embodied those tenets and you've embodied those codes. And one day you'll look around and your world will look very different to you, and you may be hard-pressed to put a time or a day on when that happens. You'll just know that somehow something powerfully different is occurring within your body. And as that happens, not when, not if, as that happens to you, bless you in that moment. Blessings of knowledge, wisdom, and compassion. Perhaps one of the greatest gifts left to us today through the traditions of the ancient Essenes is the gift of a verbal code, allowing us the opportunity to move gracefully through the experiences of life that have hurt us the most. This gift, relatively obscure in ancient texts and seen frequently in modern texts and perhaps not understood, is known as the gift of the blessing. Through the gift of blessing, we're asked to acknowledge for the possibility that without exception, every event that unfolds in our world, in our lives, in our presence, is an event that has originated from a single source of all that may be. We're asked to allow for the possibility that there is one source for all that we may ever know in our lives. And in that possibility, anything that follows, regardless of how joyous or how painful, it must be part of the one. It must be part of that source of all that is. When we bless an event that has hurt us or an individual that has caused us pain or grief, what we're saying in that moment is that we acknowledge the divine or the sacred nature of that which is unfolded, and it is divine and sacred by being virtue of part of the one. I'm often asked, how is it that we're expected to bless something that has hurt us tremendously in life? And perhaps the best way for me to answer that is to describe to you the process as I witness the process. For me, when I have had the opportunity, and it is an opportunity, to witness an event, perhaps something in my life, or perhaps my life has been present while an event has unfolded in the life of another. When I've had the opportunity to witness these things, and I hear of the pain and the misery and the suffering, what I find myself doing is taking a deep breath and allowing for the possibility that although I may not understand what has just occurred, it is part of the one. It is part of the single source of all it is. It is sacred in nature. That understanding then allows me to remove myself, in a sense, and as I witness the events before me, whether it's wartime footage on the 6 o'clock news, or the killing of animals in a game reserve in southern Africa without need to kill those animals, and I feel that emotion, is the blessing that allows me to distance myself just a little bit, and from that to release the charge that I'm feeling in my body. As I say, bless the hunters that are taking the lives of those animals. What happens for me is the entire scene almost slows without sound into an almost surrealistic animation. And as I witness the events before me from that perspective, and I say, bless those men in what they do so that they know themselves in that way. Bless the animals for what has occurred to them, and bless me in the witnessing. And I say it again, and I say it again, and I say it again. And what begins to happen is that through the blessing, which does not condone or consent or necessarily agree with what has occurred. Blessing isn't agreement. Blessing simply acknowledges that what I have witnessed is part of the creative forces responsible for this world, and as such, that which I have witnessed is divine in nature. It is sacred, and I have just been present in a sacred act. From my perspective, and through the traditions of the Essenes, as we say the words, there's a magic that occurs in blessing that which has hurt us the most. There's a power. It takes a very powerful being to bless that which is hurt rather than lash out at that which has hurt us. And it is in that power that we find our highest levels of mastery, as we find ourselves allowing for great possibilities of experience without becoming emotionally ensnared in the charge of what those possibilities have offered. The gift of the blessing is our promise. It was given to us long, long ago, that regardless of what we experience in our lives in this world, that each of us has the opportunity to return to our source, whole, intact, and with grace, as we have known ourselves in this world and carry the benefit of that knowing to our next experience. "1,700 years ago, key elements of our most sacred heritage were lost to the West. They were relegated to elite priesthoods and mystery schools. Perhaps the most significant of the information lost during this time was a reference to an ancient technology these texts said had the power to heal our bodies, to bring a lasting peace to our world, perhaps avoid the greatest tragedies ever to face humankind. With the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1946 and 47, and subsequent new interpretations of these scrolls, what we find is that the ancients had insights into a language that we're just beginning to understand. It's a language that may perhaps be the bridge, the lost link between religion and science. Quantum science today suggests the possibility of many, many experiences for every moment of our lives. For example, for each experience that we have of disease or illness or war in our world, another opportunity, another possibility exists where those things never happened. In laboratory conditions, quantum science has verified the existence of simultaneous possibilities occurring in the same moment in time. The mystery has been, how do we access those possibilities? How do we touch those elements of our world? Well, perhaps the most significant of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the great Isaiah scroll. Isaiah describes these possibilities in the language of his time. And what he says to us is that there are, in fact, many possibilities unfolding in each moment of our lives. They lie in a state of rest, awaiting the time that we awaken them through the choices that we make in our lives in the moment. And it is these choices that I believe bring the significance of the Isaiah effect, a term that I've given to these conditions that allow for the miracles of our lives to unfold. Under laboratory conditions, science has determined that there are very specific conditions that must occur before the miracles of healing and the miracles of peace can happen. Isaiah takes us one step further. Not only describing the possibilities, he shares with us a lost mode of prayer. And it is in this mode of prayer that we transcend the science and the religion and the mysticism, perhaps bringing the best of what each of those have to offer together into a new understanding of our world and how we relate in the presence of one another. Each time we do this, we experience the Isaiah effect. So one of the keys in understanding what the Isaiah effect is actually saying to us is an ancient tenet that suggests that the world around us mirrors the conditions of the beliefs that we become from within. So our anger, our rage, our jealousy, our hate, as well as our love, compassion, understanding, and forgiveness that we have become from within in each moment of our lives is mirrored by the quality of the world around us, the weather patterns, the shifts of the crust of the earth, even social and political conditions. From this perspective are indicators. They become barometers of what we have become from within. The second part of that tenet suggests that as we change our belief systems, as we change our thoughts, feelings, and emotions from within, that those changes then are mirrored in the world around us. And in that way, we embody the power to avert perhaps the greatest tragedies ever to face humankind as we honor all life in our beliefs from within. We now know that feeling, what we call feeling, is the way that the ancients viewed prayer. Prayer, rather than the outward expressions of asking that prayer come to pass. Isaiah identifies what we now know as a lost mode of prayer that invites us to have the feeling that the prayer has already been answered rather than asking that creation bring that answer to us. So rather than asking that peace be present in our world, for example, we are invited to have the feeling and give thanks for the peace that is already here. And in that way, as the outer world mirrors the inner, attract the condition that allows the miracle of peace. Over the years, I've had many people come to me and ask me for my insight into the possibility of why perhaps their affirmations and their prayers have not been answered. Without knowing each individual and each individual circumstance, I can speak only in generalities. What we know is this, is that if our affirmation is only a thought or a visualization, or if our prayer is only a thought of the asking that something come to pass, in the absence of the emotion, of the feeling that fuels this prayer, it is an empty thought. And this is where this lost mode of prayer and the Isaiah effect come into play. They invite us to incorporate the feeling that we were encouraged to forget in these texts 1700 years ago. They invite us to reincorporate this power of feeling in our world, empower our thoughts, empower our prayers through the feeling, and specifically through the quality of feeling that states that our prayers have already been answered. So if we're asking to have more love in our world, in our lives, for example, through this mode of prayer, we would come from the place, assume the quality of thought, feeling, and emotion, that that love was already present, and in that way create the conditions that allow that miracle to come into our lives. Through our understanding of what Isaiah was saying to us in the words of his day, we now have the opportunity to redefine the most frightening prophecies that have been offered for our time in history. Those of the biblical prophecies, many of the ancient and indigenous traditions that suggest we're living a time of tremendous chaos and destruction in our near future that will lead us into this time of peace and vitality and prosperity. Now we know, if the Isaiah effect holds, and if quantum science proves the ideas that they are offering to us under laboratory conditions today, what we know is that all of those frightening prophecies are possibilities only. They are existing in a dormant state. They lie in a state of rest, and they need never be awakened unless we call to them from what we have become from within. Today, modern science, specifically quantum science, gives credibility to the ideas of Isaiah as they suggest that time as we know it exists as many, many, many possibilities. Think of them as parallel roadways, all moving at the same time in the same directions. Every once in a while, the roadways come very, very close together, and in those moments it becomes very easy to leap from one possibility to another. We call these quantum leaps. It was a physics professor at Princeton University in 1957, Dr. Hugh Everett III, that coined the term choice points for the moments where the possibilities become very, very close. And it's in the moments of the choice points that we have the opportunity to leap from one possibility into another, perhaps avoiding the greatest tragedies of human history. It's in the moments of the choice point, even though the momentum may appear already to be in place, even though we're already moving toward a global war, even though the conditions of a global health epidemic may be in place, even though the weather patterns of a superstorm may be bearing down upon us, in the momentum of those events as we approach a choice point, it's the choice point that allows us to shift into a new possibility where the outcome of these potentials may never come to pass. So I'd like to share a specific example of how the Isaiah effect has been incorporated in terms of mass prayer with global consequences. So I'll begin this story on November 13th. It was a Friday, 1998, Friday the 13th of November, 1998. The world woke up that morning to newspaper headlines that said it was only a matter of time, that all the negotiations between the United States and Iraq had broken down, that it was only a matter of time before U.S. warplanes would lead a military assault into the country of Iraq, that innocent civilians would certainly be killed, and that it would begin a conflict, a long-lasting conflict between the two countries. Well, on that evening, this is precisely what happened. The order was given, the warplanes left their bases, and they began their long journey into the airspace of Iraq. And what military historians will show is that a mystery occurred that night, a mystery unfolded, because within 30 minutes of the planes leaving their bases, an unprecedented order for those planes to stand down, which is the military term inviting them to come back to their bases without leaving any of their bombs or any of their ordnance behind. That order was given, and the planes did in fact turn around in the air, come back to their bases, and not one life was lost to the U.S. warplanes that evening. Now, historians view this as a mystery. What history may not show, however, is on that same evening, during the same window of time that these planes were in the air, there was a worldwide prayer vigil that was in place. It had been planned for months. It had nothing to do with our planes in Iraq. It wasn't a prayer to stop the bombing or to bring those planes home. It was coordinated by the World Wide Web on the Internet, and we know that at least 75 nations and several hundred people participated that night in a global prayer of peace. Not a prayer for peace, saying, "Dear God, please let there be peace in this world." Rather, a prayer of peace, giving thanks for the peace that was already there. Through the eyes of the prophet Isaiah, when we do that, we create the conditions that allow the miracle of peace to be present in our world. Well, it was during that time that those warplanes turned around and came home. And to many skeptics, they say, well, it's just a coincidence. And as a scientist, I would tend to agree, except that the correlations are so high between the times that these kinds of prayers happen and the events of our outer world mirror the effects of the prayer.